So that brings us to Bitcoin. So what do you think about Bitcoin? Are you orange pilled yet?
People, have asked me to sort of pin my flag to look. I think one can look at this again from a legal perspective and ask questions. If you want the Sharia perspective on it, then I can tell you that there are certain issues which need to be discussed, and I think perhaps those discussions have not advanced as quickly as they should have done, given the growth in public interest.
So, very important begin or entry to the discussion. As you can see, alhamdulillah, Shaykh is doing his duty. He's inviting people to embrace Bitcoin. And sometimes I make this joke, like you're giving da'wah and that kind of stuff. And the reason for that is not because Bitcoin is a religion. It's not like that. But however, it is something, as I believe, it is a tool, a very important tool for a Muslim to escape a riba, which is quite important, quite interesting how this topic came up at the back end of a long discussion about riba. These two are, I don't believe, I know some scholars have dismissed the connection, but I think this is really connected. The connection between our current riba monetary system and Bitcoin. I don't think you can have a discussion about Bitcoin without discussing that. But so Holy is asking him about his views on Bitcoin, and let's see what he has to say.
But there is a general point in Sharia that wealth is anything that's useful.
So hopefully, I want to break this thing down so you can learn from it. So, general principle that wealth is something which is useful. Very, very important definition. Pin that in your head. Wealth is something that is useful. Okay.
And property is wealth that can be owned.
And property is wealth that can be owned. So, wealth that is useful, money can be wealth that is useful, and property that is owned. These two properties, you could say, are the basis that he lays down anyway for money. Now, just on that point here, wealth that can be owned. So anything that has a use case. So a wealth that something is useful. Now, one of the main, I would say, one of the main things that a lot of people overlook about Bitcoin, and I think hopefully you may even see it here. Again, pin this point in your mind as you see this discussion progress, is that people fail to highlight and look at and recognize the utility of Bitcoin. What you tend to find is that most people who discuss this topic, especially those who are skeptical or outright reject Bitcoin, only see Bitcoin as a means to get more fiat, as an investment tool to make money. Even that phrase, Bitcoin is used to make money. Bitcoin is money. So to say I'm investing in Bitcoin, I want to buy some Bitcoin, all these terms still speak to the audience that believes that Bitcoin is something to make money. Not that Bitcoin is money. I mean, if I was to go on Umrah and I had to get some Saudi riyals, it's rare you say, I'm going to go buy some riyals. You say, I'm going to exchange some money for riyals. And where's the money exchange? You know, so where's the riyal shop? Because we recognize that Saudi riyals is money, pounds is money, and therefore we're going to exchange one form of money for the other. When people say, when we say money has to have utility or something which is useful, when it comes to the issue of gold, I guess the utility of gold is that gold could be used for jewelry, can be used for this, can be used that, but gold could also be used to store value. And Bitcoin is the purest form of money because that is the only utility of Bitcoin. No one has Bitcoin to adorn their body or their homes with beauty and zina. Bitcoin is only used to store wealth to be spent at a later date. That's its only function. So that's the first thing. And the second one is that property is something that is owned. And again, Bitcoin did something which had never been done before. It allowed for ownership in the digital. Bitcoin facilitated the fact or the ability to have something which is pure information, but yet encapsulates property rights. So if I made a poem and or I made a design for a new chair or furniture, and I was to copyright that furniture, I'd go to the patent office or the copyright office and I'd register that thing, and they would put my name and say this design is yours and blah, blah, blah. But the only way to enforce that copyright is through the law. Whereas there's nothing stopping someone from taking that design of my chair or table and making their own chair and table according to those specifications. I would have to go to the law and ask the law to enforce my property rights. That's essentially what intellectual property is. Because there's no way to enforce that otherwise, because information. Bitcoin, on the other hand, I can prove I own it. I can demonstrate I can own it. And one of the ways to demonstrate that is the fact that you cannot take it from me. That's key. Something we never had before. And I think this is really where the challenge is. Once a person recognizes this is the function that Bitcoin has brought, ownership of the digital, ownership of information, and the ability to transfer that ownership to someone else. Once a person recognizes this feature, then we can start understanding or begin to understand the utility of Bitcoin. Up until that point, Bitcoin is just a speculative asset. Even his words, asset. Anyway, we'll continue what he says. But as my premise here, I could almost say I am answering the premise of why Bitcoin is money from the very first statement, is that wealth is something that has utility or function or a use case, and that property is something that can be owned. So therefore, I say Bitcoin's utility is the fact that it is money and it can function as money. And it has property rights built within the code. Good enough.
So, there are some kinds of wealth that can't be owned, like sunlight or a beautiful view, or some public, like water, for example, underneath the ground, is definitely wealth because it has a use, and wealth is anything that's useful to society.
So he gives examples of certain things that may have a use case or utility, but it's not property or can't be owned or whatnot. And he mentioned an example of sunlight or water underneath the ground. And I think what's important to recognize here is not necessarily the statement, but the reason, the maqsid, the intention. Why can't I own sunlight? Because I can't actually capture the sunlight. For example, I say, look, don't take that sunlight. It's mine. There's no way to do that. It's just something that just comes. Same thing with like air. I mean, if air is all around, I can't say, oh, don't take my air. This is my air, not your air. I can't capture it. However, if I was able to capture something like water, for example, imagine there was a river and I got my container. I can't own the river. The river's open. It's a public good. Anyone can access the river. But if I now get my bottle and I fill that water or bottle with water, and it's in my possession now it's mine. Because I'm able to actually enforce property rights. So it's not just an issue of public utility and all kind of stuff. So yeah, you can't in Islam take possession of public goods. But if you have able to capture some of that good, then it can become yours. So it's important to understand that nuance as why does Islam not allow you to take possession of certain things? One of the reasons is because it's either public good, it's open to everyone, or it's just not feasible. You just can't actually capture it.